Hi, Carrie. It is 1 o'clock, so I will call our August Zone Advisory Board meeting to order, and I will have Blair do roll call.
Mr. Vettel,
Here.
Mr. Steen,
Here.
Ms. Fry, Ms. Haugen, Mr. Davison,
Here.
Mr. Madler,
Here.
Ms. Saar, Ms. Bollinger.
Here. Thank you. I did hear from Jen and Julie that they're both not available to attend today, so I knew they would be gone, but thank you all for attending. We do have, I wouldn't say a lighter agenda this month, but hopefully we'll have opportunity for some discussion because we do have 2 spotlights on order as well. But after roll call, if everybody had an opportunity to review the minutes from our June meeting, if there was no changes, additions, or deletions, I would entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
A second.
Second.
Joel, all in favor, say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, same sign. Thank you. I'm going to, like we try to have program spotlights, and this month we have 2. I'm going to start with Jeremy. He's with our Adult Protective Services program here, in which Jeremy is one of our social workers with that program. We have 3 others, so a total team of 4. And I don't want to take your thunder, Jeremy, but Jeremy's been with us for how many years? You're going to have to turn your little light to green because we have people online. The other thing I want to remind people, this is a good time to ask questions as well, too. But how long have you been with us again?
February of 2014.
So Jeremy has many years of experience. One thing with Adult Protective Services, it is a I'll say grant or an agreement we get to run that program for. We just renewed that agreement for the next 2 years with HHS. So it isn't, not every zone in the state provides adult protective services. We do it, and it's not just for Cass County, but it's for the 6 counties in southeastern North Dakota. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Jeremy.
Thanks, Gail. Thanks, everybody. Yeah, as Gail mentioned, 2014, I actually started in the home and community-based division, and then January of 2018 moved to adult protection full-time. Prior to that was at Sanford Merit Care for a number of years. I have 3 other colleagues, Chelsea, Lindsay, and Susan. And part of the handouts I passed around, I only made 10 copies, so it's the Vulnerable Adult Protective Services fact sheet, a lot of definitions in there, what a vulnerable adult is, different forms of abuse, as well as a copy of the intake form that we use, one of the 3 ways that we do receive reports, the 1607, and then the map of North Dakota Protective Services in the state. And we do cover the 6 southeastern counties, Ransom, Sargent, Richland, Steele, Trail, and of course, Cass County. So we serve individuals 18 and older. Believe it or not, we do work with 18-year-olds, 19-year-olds, 20-year-olds if they meet the definition of a vulnerable adult. And our main goal is to investigate allegations of abuse, self-neglect, exploitation. And then as mentioned on that fact sheet, it does have the different definitions of a vulnerable adult, forms of abuse that we investigate. More of those definitions can be found on the Century Code 50-25.2-01. Kind of a misconception we sometimes have is we are not an emergent service, so we always recommend the reporter, there's an imminent danger or an emergency, to please dial 911. We do receive reports on different levels, a priority 1, or excuse me, a priority 2, a priority 1, and then a high priority. We typically don't pay attention to those too much because we usually get involved within, if it's a weekend, reports made late Friday, we're already doing the job, Monday, investigating, making calls, going out there. But high priority is, I believe, 48 hours. Priority 1 would be within 5 days, and then priority 2 would be within 10 days. We receive reports, or a backup minute. We do, since we're not emergent service, the intake line is only answered Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. So again, if something's made late Friday, intake prioritizes everything that was done on the weekend, and they're the first to get out. If you can think of any professional, that's usually who we receive reports from. There are mandated reporters, so that's anything in a service-related field, medical field, but anyone. I mean, we receive reports from anybody. I do have a list here, but I'm not going to go through that. Sometimes different agencies, organizations will reach out to us to staff a case. Hey, should we report? I don't know. We never say don't report. We always say, no, make a report. If you have this feeling or you're noticing something, make a report. Because more often than not, it's kind of picture the iceberg, that poster. What's on the service level, that's the report is made on. We find a whole lot more, which is unfortunate. So, but that's why we do always advise to please make a report, because we have the ability to, go knock on the doors, pull in medical professionals. We're covered under state statute. We can pull medical to review. It is client driven, but we do a lot behind the scenes, to try to figure out, are they following up with the doctor? Are they going to appointments? Did they allow that home health agency to go in? As mentioned, the 4 different types of concerns that we investigate would be exploitation, self-neglect, abuse, and neglect. The biggest number of reports that we get is on self-neglect. Maybe you've seen the show Hoarders. I mean, that's kind of what they think APS does. I mean, it's more than that, but usually it's, an example, someone goes to the bank, they have an unkept appearance, behaviors, things aren't adding up, and the teller just, this doesn't seem right. They were, different a few weeks ago, and we get a report, and, sometimes we find there's substance abuse going on, or there's underlying dementia, and they're doing enough to get by, to not draw any big red flags, but that's where it's helpful. We get the report sooner than later, and we can start investigating and trying to get that person some help. Financial exploitation cases are probably the next. As mentioned, banks they're a pretty big reporter, financial exploitation, but we have a lot of, it's kind of that saying, the strong prey on the weak. We get a lot of folks who on Social Security, Social Security disability, and the wrong people find that out, and they start calling, there's no blood relation, but they call them grandpa or dad or sister, and then pretty soon they're manipulating that person who's vulnerable to give them some of their money, and then that vulnerable adult is not getting their own needs met because of that. Neglect and abuse kind of sometimes go hand in hand. Kind of some tricky situations we get. That's kind of an example. Say we got grandma who's living with some family members, and she's very stubborn, doesn't want to go to the doctor, doesn't want any home health, refuses. The family's doing everything they can, and then grandma dies. And then coroner's involved, we get involved, and because there's wounds that are found on the back. So, family member, why didn't you notice this? Why didn't you do something sooner? So those do get tricky, which kind of leads me in we're always doing trainings. We go around, usually people seek us out to ask us to do trainings for them, but sometimes we'll have a situation like a report from a certain agency, and we haven't met with those people yet, so we'll do a lot of trainings throughout the community, different agencies, professionals. Each of us kind of have our own niche. We go to different, we attend different community meetings. I do the human trafficking meeting that is actually starting back up again. It's kind of taken a small hiatus. A couple colleagues, they go to the Homeless Coalition, they go to the Hoarding Coalition, and then we do have monthly multiple disciplinary team meetings. You name it, everyone, firefighters, police, attorneys, medical staff, Southeast, they attend, and we just staff cases, how to better assist these individuals, what are barriers in the community, and then some barriers I just wanted to touch on. I didn't mention this earlier, but self-determination. We all have our right to choice. We have that freedom, thankfully, and we have to honor that. This is definitely a client-driven field. If they don't have capacity, that's another thing. But if they have capacity, they're free to live how they want, do what they want, I guess, as long as it's in their own home. Whole nother situation. But we just have so many cases where we do go unannounced, because if we tend to call ahead of time, they'll usually tell us, no, we don't want to work with you. So we do show up, and we just do whatever we can safely to let them know that, hey, we're here to help you. No one's in trouble. We just want to talk to you about this concern that was given to us. So that's kind of a barrier. We have to honor self-determination, as we should, but they have a right. So sometimes we don't get involved the first time. Usually cases do come back, so it's usually that second or third time we can get our foot in the door. Guardianships is also a very big need. That always seems like that's on the topic of discussion. We have 4 or 5 agency guardians that we work with in the state. There's a few independent ones, and they just get full or they lose staff. So we'll have clients in the community that need a legal decision maker. There's no family, or family it doesn't have their best interests in mind. And the standard is we usually get turned down when we make a referral for a guardian right away. We get them on the coalition wait list and just do whatever we can to keep other agencies involved, that try to limit that harm. And it makes sense, because if the guardians don't have the staff or their census is high, they can't take another client. That would probably cause more harm than good too. Another sometimes misconception, we're not there to fix. Social workers, we want to do that, but we're there to investigate and then offer assistance, give options. Can't really force anybody to do anything. Again, if they're not competent, we pull in the medical team, get some capacity testing, and then pursue guardianship. This is driven by the adult, not family, not outside agencies. Sometimes we find ourselves actually advocating for the client. They're not following society norms, but it's their right, and we got to educate other agencies possibly that this is their right. They can do this. Keep us in the loop. We'll try to offer some assistance and give some resources to them, but it's ultimately up to the client. The goal of the state is always to focus on independence. We're not there to take the person out and put them in a nursing home. It's to keep them in their home for as long as possible, as safe as possible, least restriction. As mentioned, we work with medical providers constantly. Sanford, Essentia, Family Healthcare, very good working with us, because we're covered by state statute to be able to release information and talk about that individual. Other than that,
I have a question.
Yeah.
Okay, you mentioned intake, 8 to 5. Who does intake, and is that statewide?
Correct. Yep, that's statewide. There's 3 individuals. They're actually listed on that map that handle the intakes. And that reminds me, I don't think I mentioned how intakes are received. You can go on the DHS website, and there'll be a link for adult protection. You can fill out a form online. You can pull that 1607 from the DHS website, email or fax that in, or then the Aging Resource and Disability link, that phone number you can call. So, and they're pretty good about within a day. If there's a message left, they get back to the reporter. And if intake has to follow up with the reporter, it's just to gather more information. We sometimes go into situations pretty blindly, so we always encourage the reporter to put as much info as they can. Weapons, animals, who else is living in home, contacts, whether it's family or friends.
How often are you out in the other counties, like traveling?
Yeah, I guess for me, it kind of has come in spurts, but ever since those storms, it's every week I'm heading, so I'd say every week we're heading out.
Since the summer storms.
Yeah, I don't know, it just seems like it's worked out that way, but, you know, yeah, kind of comes in spurts, but
Questions? Anybody? Kyle?
So I appreciate the information. So when you talked about intake, it made it sound like intake is done at the state level and then they refer it back out to you. Is that?
correct, yep,
Okay. And so the people that do the intake are state employees
yes.
and then you're under contract, you're a county employee that serves this region.
Correct. Yeah. There's only 2 zones that I'm aware of that have the agreements. The other places, it's us, Cass, has done vulnerable adult or adult protective services that we've had that agreement for quite a few years. And then I think it's Montreal, that northwest corner, also does that zone, whatever that zone's called, I can't remember. They also have that agreement. The other counties in the state or regions are covered by, are those HHS employees, do you know? Or are they other nonprofit, maybe organizations doing that work?
I believe they are through
Make
the
sure.
state, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And then Region 6, that one in purple, that's also a contract.
Yeah, so they're not, it's not across the board, much like economic assistance or child welfare. It's something that has always been, I think, part of, at least in Cass or this region, part of when we did HCBS, it was part of that department. And then that continued.
So is it federal money or is it state money that comes on this contract with Human Services?
I would say it's state money.
State
We
money?
just updated, just did that agreement. There was some COVID dollars in it, that's a 2-year, of course. The last amount, this year, we just got the contract back, the agreement back, and it is HHS dollars.
And then
state
from a
dollars.
reporting process on that contract, what are we required to send them or how are we evaluated for the quality of work that's done here?
It's, our workers, really their program person is with HHS. Their program director, we're kind of the people manager of them, the day-to-day people management of the APS workers, but they have requirements of reporting that Jeremy can talk about more of what they have to get in. And I think that that state position is open right now.
Yep. No, that's good.
Expand.
Who was the
wanted-
previous one at the state level?
It was,
Well, Michelle Gayat for a
Michelle
long
Gayat,
time.
yep.
And then there was
Alexis. It was so quick.
yeah, she wasn't there
remember.
very long. So it's kind of in it's under Nancy Nicholas Myers, that
So
department.
again, do they report from a state level what the outcomes are? You
Okay.
know, and how how many intakes there are?
Mhm.
How are cases closed? What are, you know?
So I'm just gonna, for Region 5, I mean, we're really good. I mean, we get our documentation in, we are out seeing people. We have a program that we document in. It's, the only way to get to it is a court subpoena. Sometimes that happens. But then the lead at the state, it's open right now. That person reviews the documentation. And I don't want to get too technical, but in that program, it has all the points that we have to hit, the requirements that we have to put in. So it's like it's a narrative. When we see somebody, you know, it's typing out the details that happened, and then that program, it's those keys point that we have to address. If we don't, we have to put a reason why. You know, act of God, the weather deterred us from getting there safely. You know, blizzards in North Dakota, or they refuse to talk to us. Because yeah, we are required to have a face-to-face.
Much like child welfare in those different hours, but, That same
So if
report.
there's a job opening within that contract, do we hire them here?
we hire them here.
The state isn't. And do we get some administrative fees to do that? Or is
No,
it just a direct
It's
salary?
direct
expect-
salary too. Yeah, it's just covering in a couple, well, now it's been 2 years ago. We did get an increase. I went in because it was not covering the amount of the salaries and benefits for our 4. And we did have need for those 4 in this southeast corner. And no other entity that I'm aware of, they've been long-term employees of social services and the zone, would be interested. So I did go in requesting more, increased dollars in that agreement, and we were awarded that to cover at least the operating expenses, because they do travel a lot, and their benefits and their salaries. I did request again this year, this 2-year agreement, because we basically got the same amount. I said, that is not gonna cover basically for 2 years, and then we were declined. So that will come out of zone budget. We'll have to supplement that, to keep that or reevaluate that at that time.
But with the changes in the guardianship program, do you see an impact or a benefit or I know it's probably early to tell, but
I think what you're asking is there's that new coalition or that's going to be out there to provide. I haven't seen an impact.
we're
it's-
trying to have less on the waiting list, I guess was one of the.
I mean,
Would that have started really
But it
just
just-
now?
yeah.
Yeah, so it maybe hasn't,
That was a bad question because it's just getting its feet off the ground, I'm sure.
hopefully that will have a little bit of,
yeah,
but there's a big waiting list for guardianships.
Some of it was reimbursement too for people that are guardians.
Mhm.
To increase that at the same time of increasing the number of dollars to get more.
Dan, you have go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, thanks, and Jeremy, thanks. And this is maybe a follow-up or tag on to what Kyle was asking regarding guardianships. And so, what I heard Jeremy say is that guardianships are a big need, and it sounds like there's been some changes and some effort that's just starting to kind of increase that or make that more efficient. And so my question would be maybe more of, not to dive too deep now, but would that possibly be maybe an agenda item that as an advisory board, we could maybe talk about and dive into a little bit more to see if there's anything we can be doing locally to be working on and planning for and monitoring and provide to give you what you need and or to make it more efficient for the next legislative session?
That's a good point. Yep.
and we used to have biweekly statewide staff meetings, and we talk about this a lot. But with that position vacated, we haven't met now since June 20th. We communicate constantly by email or phone, but honestly, I don't know where that's at, and we're hopeful that it would kind of help move things along. And but I get both sides. I get too, if the census is full and the guardian just can't, because it's a last resort when we do a guardianship. So you can just
Mhm.
imagine the type of scenarios and cases, and sometimes when they're already placed, the individual is already placed in a hospital with a goal to go to a nursing home, that does make things easier. But when they're out in the community, it's tricky.
Mhm. I'll write that down, Dan, and that's a great suggestion to keep that at the top. Any other comments before we move on to our next topic or spotlight? Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you.
It's always good to hear that. Carissa is here. She's our family services manager. Many of you have seen or met her before. So I've asked her to come and talk, and there's a whole back row of some of our supervisors from Family Services back there as well that can feel free to chime in, any one of you at any time, because we're pretty informal. But asked to kind of give an overview, especially, once again, questions and answers are really great, but some kind of basic overview of, family services, and especially child protective services, kind of that process of what they do in their unit or their department, and specifically that unit, and then that process to foster care or case management. But I'll turn it over to Carissa. You're going to have to turn your button to green so our virtual audience can hear you.
Got it. Perfect. Okay, like Gail said, we do have a lot of our family service supervisory team here today. We have Brad from his right to left, Brad, Megan, Shannon, Jody, and Rebecca. So they do represent all of the programmatic pieces on our floor, from CPS through programs, through case management. We do have a couple of supervisors who are out, either at training or on leave this week. So I do appreciate them coming and providing also their expertise as we talk through specifically some of our child protection assessment team pieces for our family service team. You likely will hear many parallels to adult protective services. We do have many things that we share in common with them, kind of in that continuum of care. One of them is having a centralized reporting line across the state of North Dakota. And so the front side of the paper does just provide what that phone number is, what the service is, and kind of what the key benefits have been outlined for that centralized reporting line. Everything does get reported to them, from our mandated reporters to just general citizens who are concerned about the safety and well-being of children across North Dakota. Once our centralized intake receives that information, they do process that information, determine if it does meet statute definition to move forward for an assessment, and then they distribute it to the appropriate zone where that family is currently residing, and or potentially where that abuse or neglect may have taken place of that child. So that's kind of how the distribution of the reports come. Once the reports come into our agency, then our CPS SUPs would review those and then make a decision about assigning those out to our child protection assessment team members. Currently, right now on our team, we do have 15 child protection assessment workers who work our traditional shift, which is that 8 to 5 shift. And then we do have 5 FTEs that are covering our extended hour shift, which we've talked a little bit about in the advisory board, but they currently work 10:30 to 7:30. So we do have 20 FTEs right now who are serving Cass County on abuse and neglect reports. When our workers do receive those reports, another thing that they do have in common with adult protection is that we do have requirements based on kind of the level of severity of that report coming into our agency. So on the back side, it does talk about prioritizing those CPS reports, identifying what our response time is to those reports when they come into our agency, as well as what kind of falls into each of those categories for us to have to respond to. Because our abuse and neglect reporting line is available 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, that's primarily when we get our reports in. We do have an on-call worker who does support hours after 5 p.m. Those would typically come in through centralized dispatch, so through Red River Dispatch, if law enforcement's on scene. If somebody presents at medical facility, they would call our on-call worker to consult, request assistance, things like that. So that's kind of how the after-hours response works for child protection. When we do have a worker who receives a report, they really have 2 primary responsibilities. They have a responsibility to gather sufficient information to determine if maltreatment of that child is taking place and if that child is safe. So they would assess the immediate safety for that child, and they would assess the ongoing safety of that child. If during the course of their assessment they identify a child is unsafe, they would determine what level of intrusion they would need to take. Sometimes it means removal of that child, in which case we would have to access law enforcement to place that child into protective custody, or we would have to request custody through our juvenile court. If we are granted custody, those children would be placed into care, either kinship care or into foster care. And that case then would be transferred over to our case management team, who would continue to work with the family on really the change management that's needed to get that child reunified with their family. If there is a identification that the child is unsafe, but we can wrap enough supports around that family and that child to keep the family together, we would do that. We will create a present danger or a safety plan around that family, and then that case would also transfer over to our case management team to really monitor that safety plan, that present danger plan, and then support the change management within that family to continue the ongoing safety to determine when it's safe enough for us to close. Similar to Adult Protective Services is we do have the ability to access a lot of information by statute on our child protection assessment cases. People are not often frequently excited about us wanting to gather information about their family, and so we do have the authority to access a lot of information without releases of information. We can see kids in other settings without parental permission, so that we do make sure that we are getting kind of essentially a clean interview of that child without a lot of influence, to determine whether or not they are safe, make sure they're comfortable being able to share information about what's going on for them and within their family. So another commonality that we have in that regard, we do have a lot of interfacing with law enforcement, with our medical facilities in town. We do support a lot of other zones across the state because we do have a Trauma One center here in Fargo, and so kids who are being airlifted in or brought in by ambulance from other zones often need our assistance and support in meeting with the family or those children, and so our CPS team and our family service team does support kind of that initial initiation of those cases. And then we also have some mental health facilities that can do some partial and inpatient that also bring in youth from across the state that we also offer support then to other zones across the state. Let's see. We have quite a bit of interfacing with our legal team. We do have 3 assistant state's attorneys who are directly providing support to our family service team on those cases that require legal intervention, whether that is for either just strictly requirements for service planning because a child is unsafe, and or removal and ongoing placement of that child. So we do work quite closely with our assistant state's attorney's office, and then also the criminal side when we are working joint investigations with law enforcement on some of those more significant child abuse and neglect concerns. Yes, so I handed out the initial response timelines for child protection. They also have timelines related to closing cases. So timelines related to that is they do have 62 days to complete an assessment, including all the information gathering and the paperwork on that case. And that's kind of the timeline that families are expecting us to complete that information and make a decision about that case. There are exceptions to that where we can require an extension on that timeline. And then there are specifically things laid out in statute that identifies when we can request that extension and additional time to make sure we are gathering sufficient information. Oftentimes that is, we have to gather collateral information and we can't get a hold of the collaterals and they're pertinent to the information we need. Often law enforcement cases where law enforcement is doing downloads of digital files that we need to have access to. or we are trying to make contact with suspects in those cases. They have an attorney. Some of those things often hold up process. We also have very transient families, and so sometimes they vanish and we have to try to find them and figure out where they're at. And so that also can delay our process in being able to gather the sufficient information that we need to make the best decisions for families and children. Kyle?
So what is one thing that you would improve or change in order to better protect children? It could be at the state level, it could be a law, what is one thing that you would change if you could?
One thing. Well, should have sent your questions ahead of time. I think some things that really just is that constant understanding and evaluation of like where the bottlenecks fall with our system, because there are times that even with the best of intentions, it does make it challenging to sometimes either work across zone lines or be able to work more collaboratively. Obviously, we have a very high population in Cass County. We get a very high number of cases, but really just streamlining where we have that expertise to be able to get cases moving faster, to not have to wait for so many checks and balances, to be able to get cases off our plates, get families closed out and to the appropriate level of services. On also the continuum side, really making sure that we have appropriate services for families timely. So appropriate placements for kids so that there are not so many rules around which kids can go to which place, really relying on the expertise of our team to determine. We have a youth right now who does not reach the age requirement for a treatment level foster home, but needs that treatment level, so is disrupted from 3 placements in a very short period of time. We have kids who need inpatient chemical dependency treatment, who need inpatient mental health treatment. We can't get it for them timely, and so they are disrupting from placements. They are not able to stay safely with their families. So I think those things also, even though we have a lot of resources in our community, being able to access them timely and appropriately impacts kids being able to be safe and stable.
So are those bottlenecks mostly within our own human service zone system, or is the state play a role in moving paperwork along or overseeing anything, or are we independent enough to do that at the local level?
I would say probably at the state level is where we have most of those bottlenecks. I think there are benefits to identifying a common foundation of how practice is implemented, but there are also is a lot of nuances in a state like North Dakota where we do have more urbanized areas and more rural areas and service delivery and all those things that really needs a little bit more flexibility than what is currently outlined and available for the zones to be able to implement. And so I think as we are adjusting to that system, I think those things just need evaluation and adjustment.
You explain a little bit more. I've learned a little bit, just a little bit in my time. They're all the experts, but the process, like the intake comes in, so that ticker, the time ticker starts when we get that from intake. And intake is different than what Jeremy was talking about. That is a statewide intake run by HHS. This is statewide, but it's a zone statewide, so it's kind of a hybrid. The supervisors in that intake are zone employees from different zones. So there's, and then wherever those intake workers live, for lack of a better word, that's where they're employed by that zone, and then they might have their policy. They probably are, well, I know for a fact, they're asking then the CPS HHS worker for direction. So it's not quite as streamlined as as some of the other call centers within some of the other places. So I think there's some differences probably that way, some efficiencies probably on APS's side. Where I was going with that, Carissa, is so it comes in, the worker gets the case, and then they start, the clock starts, it might be 24 hours, it might be 72 hours, 3 days, or longer. Not many come in as a C case. We hardly get any, so it's either A or a B. Talk about the paperwork, or how do we get that closed out? What role do our supervisors play in that, and then what other partners play?
Sure. So once the case, like I said, comes into our agency, and our child protection supervisors review that, and then they assign it out to the workers. We have what we call batching teams. So workers are on a 3-day rotation for getting assigned cases. So any cases that come in that day gets assigned to one of the 4 workers who is on that batching schedule for that day. Once that case is assigned, depending on the prioritization level, really determines how quickly a worker needs to get out into the field. We really do try to encourage workers to take a look at the history in Frame. That's where we do all of our documentation. That's where their state partners pulls the data from regarding if we are meeting our response times or not. And so take a look at any history we might have with the family, as well as try to make contact with that reporter if possible, in case anything has changed since they've reported and when we've received it. And then really their first step is to get out and make contact with that victim child. That's what the timelines are connected to, is that response time to the victim child, and then to any other children who may reside within that home. So sometimes that could mean school visits in 3 different schools, because they have multiple children who attend multiple schools across Fargo, West Fargo, our community. And then after that, really trying to make contact with the parent as quickly as possible after that, so that we really get to them before the kids get to them. Sometimes that works out, sometimes it doesn't, depending on if people are responding. And then we have a responsibility to gather all of that collateral data. So whether those are school records, whether they are hospital records, whether they are mental health records, we are required to gather all of that information and to have that in our file prior to being able to staff those cases. Any case that is not going to be a confirmed finding would be an indication that maltreatment of that child has occurred, can be staffed internally with our child protection supervisors. Our child protection supervisors meet minimally weekly with each of their team members, so that they do have a good pulse on kind of where the case flow is and where the case status is. Any case that has a confirmed finding has to be staffed with our family service, or our field service specialist, which is our state partner. So they will make the final decision on whether or not we have justifiable reason to identify that that child has been abused or neglected. We staff twice a week. We have 2 standard spots with our field service specialist on Mondays and Thursdays, where our team members have to sign up with them to staff those cases. And then they will let us know if they make a finding. We do have to have all of our documentation to them by 9 a.m. Wednesday to staff on Thursday, 9 a.m. Friday to be able to staff on Mondays. So they have opportunity to review that prior to us staffing. If we don't have everything in there, they will send it back to us and indicate they aren't available to staff it at that time, which can create bottleneck regarding getting cases moved and closed. We have to wait for them to get us back the staffing note after they have staffed those cases. They have to review our confirmed letters before we're able to close that out in our system. And then once our worker hits submit in our system, there's a lot of toggles you have to click and things you have to put in after they get through all of that and they hit submit. We have to wait for our field service specialist to approve that case in Frame, and that can take anywhere from 3 to 4 days after a worker submits it for closure before we are able to get it removed from their case list. So they may send it back saying, I have a question about this, I need this, even though our supervisor has already staffed it with the child protection worker and indicated that we have adequate information to move forward. They may feel like we don't. It gets sent back to us, our worker has to take action on that and then resubmit it. So can be a little bit of a bottleneck on the back end of that. It's the same with if we have to file an extension. If we're not able to get it closed in 62 days, we have to file an extension. The field service specialist has to identify that it is a justifiable reason. They have to approve it and send it back to our worker. So those are kind of the field service specialist roles as it relates to child protection.
Those field service people are state employees,
Yes.
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 and they're managed by the state family
Yep, CFS, yep.
CFS.
Yeah, they're not necessarily regional, or they're not, they might change up. We have a strong supervisory team across the board, because we're we're almost 60, so a big volume coming in, and sometimes that's a huge bottleneck to get out. Plus, then there's quality control on top of that, QC that pulls cases and looks at those as well. And I understand the need for the federal report to make sure, but we also have the internal, all of our programs have to meet policy. That's what our economic assistance is the same. But in economic assistance, our leads and our supervisors, our workers go to those people for policy questions first and foremost, and move forward that way. Other questions? The family services team does an amazing job, Carissa, and I would say everyone, all those supervisors in the back and those ones that aren't here, really, we're getting very, very close to having, we're two away from having a total full team on that department. But that is amazing work. Everybody in the zone, I'll say, does amazing work, but have come a long ways. And the PM shift or afternoon shift has really taken stride, and I think really is a model for a zone our size, in being able to provide that support for the regular shift, but for our families, to focus on the families that we serve. Because if you think about that, that's a very busy time. Plus, we can provide better service. Plus, we can help the team members that we have here internally too. So it has been game changing. Is there places we can tweak and go? Yep, there still is. We have 2 trainers now. Have those positions filled, so that we can internally train as we go. So it's made a lot of stability within that department. So any questions online? I don't think I see a little hands up. Anything else? Thank you, Carissa. Anybody from that back row? You're more than happy. I'd be more than happy for you. Any comments? No? Okay. Thank you. Did I cut you off? Did you have something more? Next on the agenda, I was just going to have Samantha do a little personnel update from where we're at.
I will just kind of call attention and highlight the metrics that are on the back, page 11 and 12 of the packet. Just wanted to call out we're over halfway through the year. and sitting at a pretty comfortable 12.6% zone turnover with 17 hires and 15 separations for the year. The biggest bulk of our kind of increased turnover was from our PM team earlier in the year, but we have since gotten quite a bit of stability and some really great hires filling out that team. So for our family service department, we only have 3 positions to fill, and we only have 1 in our economic assistance team. So as far as, that's not right, 4 on our family service team and 1 on EA. So 5 vacancies for the whole zone. So that's just, with as many FTEs we have and with the amount of change and turnover and hiring we've done over the last several years, it's just really great to have gotten to this place. We've had an increase. We've had some really strong rosters that have come in from recruiting, which is very good. And it's good that we're at the place where we're at now. There have been some changes in our ability to control and manage posting of our positions. As a zone, a lot of it's been taken over and some of the processes have been changed, and what we're able to change in our postings has been greatly limited. So job postings across zones, across positions, even across state departments is going to look very similar, which is a little concerning from my perspective because it's very hard to tell an eligibility worker from the state from an eligibility worker here and then across different zones. So we're going to be monitoring that. Again, we've had a lot of success with our recruiting, and it's helped support our stability within the zone. So it's very important to us that we are able to maintain that. We had 1 new hire that starts today, and we've got 2 more starting next week to fill out our recruiting efforts. We've got interviews going for 2 of our vacancies this week, so we're hopeful to be able to move forward with some offers and keep getting our vacancies down.
Questions for Samantha? Comments? It's a great feeling not to have a whole bunch of openings for the team as well. Like, it's not coming in daily.
I do have a quick question. So could you elaborate a little bit more on the changes for the state taking over more of the HR, what that looks like and some of the challenges?
Sure. So contextually, there's the PeopleSoft system, which is like the state HR system. Zone employees, since we're not state employees, we're not able to be entered in that program. But all of our job postings have to run through PeopleSoft. That's just how it's been. So the state has always controlled hitting the button for our postings, running the merit process to scrub the applicants to determine qualifications and generate a roster that's then provided back to the zone. In the past, we've been able to kind of create our own job posting. So if we needed to make adjustments or if there were trends that I had seen on, like in the recruiting space for job boards, things like that, we were able to make those changes to the jobs that we would then craft it within PeopleSoft, submit the request to our business partner to hit the button to post it, and then they would scrub it to get it back to us.
So when did that change happen?
About 2 or 3 months ago, it switched. So now they're unified, and so we submit a worksheet, like a form, to say that
When
we
you say
want
unified,
a position.
you mean unified, the PeopleSoft and the process is unified? Or when you
Unified job postings, meaning
Oh, unified
like
job
a
postings.
CPS assessment worker in Cass is going to look the same as it does across the state, with the difference of the location. So unified in that way, and now the process has taken the next step further to be unified with that worksheet.
Why do they think it's necessary to enter it in the PeopleSoft system if they're not state employees?
The way it's been done and the need to unify it was it's then told that we're one team, so they're going to look the same and they'll do it the same way that they post for human service centers. They'll post the same way for zones, and the same team at the state is responsible for the posting and the management of our positions the same way that they would a human service center or a different HHS. entity.
No.
No, technically there's some visibility within PeopleSoft to us. It is not allowed. We are not supposed to look, even if we have access. The only right to the information we're supposed to have is the end roster and the paperwork that they have scrubbed and provided to us. Yeah, and there's not ability, even when we had access, all of the zones have the same like job posting number. So we don't have the ability to track number of applicants, successful hires, repeat applicants. None of that is able to be pulled because all of the zone positions are the same. So you couldn't pull any tracking metrics for us separately.
And some of that is, Samantha's exactly right, but some of that, so some of the data we keep internally here, that's why we want to know that. And it's important for the volume, but the zones statewide, we don't have that data. Some of this are our statewide zone directors association. Of course, we only have, there's 18 directors, I'm one vote. So if it's a small zone, yes, it's helpful to have uniform postings, but we need to recruit in a different way. I'll just say, yes, I'm part of that team, but we're unique as well as they're unique. So I might not support that uniform posting because there's a good reason, but I'm one of 18. So that usually doesn't go very far.
I think it's HHS HR, but HRMS, they partner with when it comes to job classifications and payroll.
I know there's a meeting in here at 2. So any other questions on that we had? Robert? I know you had your green button on, so we'll quickly go. Anything
Oh,
else?
no, I was just going to comment on being able to sit in on the meeting with interim director trainer was the only thing. But if you have other things to chat
Nope,
about.
I was just gonna, the operations report is in there, so I won't comment anything more. I put about the visit of interim commissioner trainer, if you want to make a comment, go ahead, and then we can close the meeting.
Well, thank you. I very much appreciated the comments of department staff during that meeting. I thought it was really kind of a remarkable feedback, knowing where the zone was a few years ago versus the feelings and attitude and direction that was expressed. It was great to hear. And as I mentioned to you earlier, obviously made the comment that boy, if there's any opportunity for improvement from my corner of the world, is just knowing that a lot of you or all of you really have 2 sets of emails, 2 sets of programs that you're logging into every day, and the opportunity to gain efficiency, if that could be streamlined, would be immense. And I know our county IT department has some ideas on how that could be accomplished, and we would love to help make that happen if there were an opportunity.
All the zone people have a ND.gov email too?
Yes. And the majority, I know, wrap it up, majority of the zones don't have an infrastructure. So they just work off of their ND.gov and use whatever and buy whatever equipment, so that all works. But many of the larger zones, that does not work. So we work off of 2. I log into 2. It's, yeah. So, sorry we ran out of time, but I know there's a 2 o'clock, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Second, all in favor, aye?
Aye.
Thank you.